So we're going to review fractions, percents, and decimals as it pertains to the Certified Welding Inspector exam. This is in collaboration with Mad Skills, which offers training for that exam. See the link in the description if you want more information for that. So the question I get a lot is like, when am I ever going to use this with like fractions, percents, and decimals? But I can tell you for this exam. So here is one table, maximum dimensions of undercutting, and check it out. You've got your fraction, your decimal, and your percent. So you've got to be able to convert between these things for this exam. So don't panic if you are rusty. However, I do want you to be ready to practice and study. If you are rusty, you are going to have to spend some time on this. But we do have free practice problems at my website created in collaboration with Mad Skills to help you review that information. Okay, so where we're going to start is let's just think about 1/2. So we know that 1/2 and 50% and 0.5, these are all the same thing. But the question is how? How do you actually do that? If you didn't know this for like a different fraction, how would you make those conversions? And that's really the point of this video, is to help you convert from any one of these three by the time we're done. So where we're going to start is first we're going to talk about how to convert from percentages to decimals. Okay, so I'm just going to use the example right here. So the thing with percentages is you have to know where the decimal point is. So if you don't see a decimal point like we don't here, then you just assume that it's at the end like this. And to convert, all you have to do then is take that decimal and always just move it 2 spots over like this. So 23% in this case would become 0.23. And so that's all you have to do to convert from a percentage to a decimal. So if I wanted to do that again with this next one, so 12.5%, notice with this particular example, so the decimal is actually spelled out for us. It's right here, but it's the same thing. It's always 2 spots, 1, 2. Okay, so I'm just going to move the decimal there, and so going from 12.5%, the equivalent decimal here would be 0.125. Okay? All right, so now what about 124%? So for this one, we can't see any decimals, so we just assume it comes at the end. That's always what you assume if it's not there, if it's not spelled out for you like it was in the last example. And then it's still just 2 spots. You go 1, 2. So if I make that conversion, what do you do with that 1? Well, the 1 just stays there. It's 1.24. So that's how you go that direction. And if you want to go the other direction, say I want to go now from decimal to percentages, you just reverse that. So just appreciate here that I was moving to the left in this case. And so now to go the other direction, I am going to just move everything to the right. And it's the same idea. So you're going to be looking for where the decimal point is. In this case, it's actually like spelled out for us, which is nice. So now instead of moving to the left, I'm going to move 2 to the right. And so then this as a percentage would become 72%. And then what about 1.45? So again, I move 2 to the right like this. And so then I get 145%. And now finally, so make sure you don't overthink this either. It's always the 2 spots, okay? So for this one, there's my decimal. Move it 1, 2 spots over. So now I just write down exactly what I would get from that. This would turn into 3.2%. I'll draw a little arrow there. Okay, so there's kind of the idea behind this. So if you're feeling pretty good about this, let's just try a few examples. I would recommend that you pause the video here and convert these either from decimal to percent or percent to decimal. Pause here, hit play when you're ready. Okay, so starting with A here, so we have a decimal and I want to convert it into a percent. So I can see here is my decimal spot, and we didn't talk about this, so you're going to have to make a little bit of a leap of faith here. So I need to move the decimal 2 spots over to here. So what do you think goes in that empty spot? It would be a 0. So this 0.4 becomes 40%. And then for B, so I got 1, 2 spots over. And so now I get 62.5%. So now we're going to go the other direction. So now I need to have kind of that decimal get moved in front of everything. It's going from the percent to the decimal. So hopefully you're starting to see like just some visual cues you can take to help you remember this. So there's the decimal is invisibly here. I'm going to move it 2 spots over. So this becomes 0.32. And now for D, the decimal is right here. Similar problem to A here, so I need to still move 2 spots over. So what do you think you do in that empty spot? You're going to put in a 0, so I kind of ran out of space here. But as a decimal, this would become 0.01. So you've always got to move those 2 spots, and then if you have an empty spot, then you just put in a 0 in that placeholder. So next, let's talk about fractions to decimals. So the fraction actually spells out the calculation to get to the decimal. It's actually nice and simple. In that, if I have something like 1/4, so the other way that you could read this is literally 1 divided by 4. That's literally how you can read a fraction, 1 divided by 4. And if I were to, to complete this particular calculation, that would come out to 0.25. So you can just use a calculator to help you with that. So you don't have to think too much more into that. Maybe you have to round, and we'll kind of work through that in a moment. The other thing I want to talk about is how do you go the other way, so now decimals to fractions. So this is a little bit trickier, so I want to remind you of just kind of how decimals work. So I'm going to use this example 0.237 in this case, okay? So the 2 is in the tenths column or spot, the 3 is in the hundredths column, and then the 7 is in the thousandths column. So, remember, tenths, hundredths, thousandths. It's like really the same way, that when we're counting, right? And so what these are telling you then is how to divide accordingly. So what do I mean by that? Okay, so I've got just a couple of examples here. So notice I've got 0.7. So this decimal goes out to the tenths column. And so what I would want to do then is I would want to write this as 7/10. And in this case, this fraction has been simplified, so I don't have to go any farther with it. Okay, so what about 0.32? So you're thinking about now what's the maximum number of decimal spots I've gone over. This is the tenths. This goes out to the hundredths, okay? So this goes out to the hundredths, so this becomes 32/100. And now we actually have to simplify this fraction. So how do we do that? Well, to simplify a fraction, if you have to do it by hand, some calculators will simplify for you and then convert back to a fraction or put it in simplest form. But if you had to just do this kind of on the fly, so when you're looking at something like this, all you have to think about is what is kind of the first number you can think of that would divide the top and the bottom. So for me, the first thing I think of would be like 2. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to divide the top and the bottom like 2 by 2. So I get 32 divided by 2 is 16, and 100 divided by 2 is 50. And so now you just think to yourself, 16 and 50, can I divide anything into those two numbers? So once again, I could divide the top and bottom by 2 again. So I'm going to divide the top and the bottom by 2. And so this will now give me 8/25. So is there anything that I can divide into 8 and 25 at the same time? There's not, so I'm done reducing. So that's how we can work through that. Okay, and so one more example, 0.125. So I'm in the tenths, hundredths, thousandths column, okay? So this means then I would want to take this 125 and put it over 1,000. Now, maybe you want to just pause here and try to simplify this one on your own. Try to do it without a calculator. Okay, so for me, when I look at this, the first thing I think of that would divide into the top and bottom would be 5. So I don't try to get too crazy with this. I literally just try to choose like the first number that pops out at me. And if I divide the top and bottom by 5, I get 25/200. And once again, I can divide the top and bottom by 5. And so if I do that, I'm going to get 5/40. And now you'll notice in this case, so 5 and 40, I can actually still divide both of those still by 5. So you may have noticed a different number, and that's totally fine if you did. Like maybe you noticed, 125 goes into 1,000 or something. That's fine. But if you didn't and you take a longer route to get to the final answer, there's no problem with that. At the end of the day, what you should have gotten to though was 1/8, and so that's kind of a path that you can take to get there. Okay, so I just want to talk a little bit more about reducing these fractions. So let's just take a moment to make some notes on reducing fractions, and let's just look at like 3 more fractions that we could reduce, just in case you want extra practice. So if you don't need the extra practice, you can move on, but if you'd like to try this just a little bit more, you can pause the video here and try these 3. So when I look at the first fraction, the first thing that pops into my mind is that 5 will divide the top and bottom. They both end in a 5. So I'm going to just go ahead and set that up. So this becomes 3/7, and then you can't go any farther with that. So that would be a reduced fraction. Okay, so moving on to the next one, so 24 divided by 60. So again, you don't have to be like a hero when you're thinking of what will divide into this. You can just, whatever pops into your brain first. So I notice these are both even, so I'm just going to divide the top and bottom by 2. And so this becomes 12/30. 24 divided by 2 is 12, 60 divided by 2 is 30. And I notice I can divide the top and bottom by 2 again. Okay, so 12 divided by 2 is 6, and 30 divided by 2 is 15. And now, so as I keep thinking through this, okay, now 3 will divide the top and bottom. So divide the top and bottom by 3 like this. And now I get 2/5. And so that would be the reduced fraction, okay? And now for the last one, so again, same idea. So I just think of the first thing that pops into my mind. And like I said, if you think of something else and then you still get to 2/5, that's totally fine. So I'm kind of taking the I'm taking the scenic route, if you will, to get to my reduction. But we'll all get to the same thing eventually. Okay, so for this last one, so I noticed that the top and bottom can be divided by 5. Okay, so 35 divided by 5 is 7. 100 divided by 5 is 20, and actually I can't divide anything else into that, so that's as much as I can reduce. So that was just a quick little aside on reducing fractions in case you needed that practice. So remember, what we were actually talking about was converting from decimals to fractions and fractions to decimals. So what I want you to do now is just check your understanding. Pause the video here, make these conversions, and then hit play when you think you've got it. Okay, so starting with A here, so notice I'm in the tenths column, so this will just convert then to 1/10, no problem. And then for B, so now I'm in the hundredths column, 0.25, so this is going to convert then to 25/100, and you can divide the top and bottom of this fraction by 25, and so 25 divided by 25 is 1. 100 divided by 25 is 4, so it's 1/4. Okay, so next you may have used your handy dandy calculator to get to the next part. 1 divided by 8, so that's literally 1 divided by 8 is what I wanted to do. So this would come out to 0.125. Okay, and then what about 15/16? So for that one, I will do 15 divided by 16, and so that comes out to 0.9375. Okay, so now let's move on to percentages to fractions. Okay, so I want to just think about the word percent, because if you think about the word percent, this makes a lot of sense. Sense with percent. Okay, so percent. So percent, cent is, it's got that base in 100, right? Like centi. So literally this means per 100. So this is telling you to this is telling you the division right in the phrase. So if I had 30%, that means 30 per 100. So what that literally means, 30 divided by 100. That's it. And then from here, it's just a matter of reducing the fraction. And you know now I could divide the top and the bottom of this by 10 if I wanted to. And so this would just become 3/10, and that would be it. Okay, so let's think about maybe just another one of these and practice this just a little bit more. So 36%. So how would you write this out then if you're trying to get it into its fraction form? So this would be 36 over 100, and it's that same game, right? So in this case, I notice I can divide the top and bottom by 2 if I'm so inclined, and so this becomes 18 over 50. I can divide by 2 again, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. So now I get 9 over 25. So there would be my fraction in this case. And now what if we want to go the other direction? So what if I want to go from fraction to percentage? So in this case, then you're going to want to first convert the fraction to a decimal and then convert that to a percent. So for instance, if I have 3/10, so I'm going to take 3 divided by 10, 3 divided by 10, that comes out to 0.3. And now everything kind of comes full circle here, because I'm going to take this and I'm going to move it over like this. And remember, what goes in that empty spot? It's a 0. So final answer in this case would be 30%. Okay, so let's do that one more time. So I've got 2/3, so this will be 2 divided by 3. So 2 divided by 3 is going to come out to 0.66667, repeating. So however you want to kind of cut that off, or however you need to round that, you can go ahead and round it to as many decimal places as you need. But remember, I'm trying to ultimately convert this to a percent, so I move this decimal over 2 spots. So my percentage in how I've written this would be 66.667. Oops, and I shouldn't have put the line there. Sorry, my bad. And that would be a percent. Okay, so why don't you pause the video one more time? Let's check your understanding. And then when you're ready, hit play. So for A, so this is going to be 80 over 100. And so I could divide the top and bottom by 10 again. So this would become 8 over 10. I can divide this one a little bit farther. I can divide the top and bottom here by 2. So this would become 4/5, okay? And then what about 99%? This would be 99 over 100. And we actually can't reduce this any farther. So that one was nice and easy as far as just that's all we can write. Okay, so what about 1/32? Remember, the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to divide 1 divided by 32. And that comes out to 0.03125. And then I need to convert that to a decimal, or sorry, to a percentage. And so if I move that decimal spot 2 spots over, this becomes 3.125%. And finally, what about 7/8? So if I divide 7 divided by 8, that becomes 0.875. And then I can move that decimal 2 spots over like that to get 87.5%. Okay, so now let's put it all together. So remember, all 3 of these, you should be able to kind of convert between all of them. So I've got this fun, like I'm probably a lot of fun of parties if I think this is fun, right? Okay, so this little exercise, we're going to fill in the blanks. I'll do the first one with you, and then I want you to try the other 2. So this is really now just to test how well you've retained everything. So I've got the fraction. So to go from a fraction to a decimal, the equivalent would be, I just have to actually, do the division, right? So all I have to do in this case would be 1 divided by 10, and that's going to give me just 0.1. And then to get to a percentage, from there, I can just move those 2 spots over. So my percentage would be 10%. And so now I've converted between the 3. So you now need to try this for the other entries. Pause here, hit play when you think you've got it. Okay, so starting with the next one, so I've got 0.2 as a decimal. So we've talked about, so this is in the tenths column. So I would write this as a fraction as 2 over 10, and I can reduce that. I can divide the top and bottom by 2. So this actually becomes 1/5. And then if I move this decimal 2 spots over, 1, 2 spots, this would just be 20%. Okay, so what about going now from the percent is the starting point. Well, I think the easiest way to go would be to first write the decimal. So remember, you've got that invisible decimal right here. And so I'm going to move this decimal 1, 2 spots over. So this becomes 0.30. So you can write 0.30, or if you drop the 0, it's just a trailing 0. So you can drop it entirely. That's totally fine. And then what about the actual fraction? So now I've got the decimal form. So I would just, and we're in the 10th spot in this case. So this would become 3/10. Now, if you wrote 0.30, you would get 30 over 100, and that would still reduce to 3/10, okay? But I'm going to drop the 0 because we don't need it. Okay, and now for this last one, so starting now with the fraction, so 2 divided by 5 is going to give me 0.4, and then 0.4, if I write that as a percent, so remember I'm going to take this decimal here and just go 1, 2 spots over, so this becomes 40%. Okay, and so that brings us to the end of this review, but there are more parts to this series, so stay tuned. If this was helpful, please consider leaving a like for the video, or if you have any comments or suggestions, feel free to leave me a comment. Otherwise, thanks for watching, guys.